Hello, all of you. I'm Dr. Sheetal Kotni from Department of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics at Kalinga Institute of Dental Sciences, Bhubaneshwar. I have collaborated with the Dental Hub in order to form an educational video on saliva, its physiology, function, and clinical significance. Now, some of us have difficulty in understanding the physiology of saliva, therefore, I've explained it in detail, and this would be from more of an endodontist point of view. Enjoy.
Saliva, physiology, function, and clinical significance. So when we expect to maintain a clean and a dry field, we think it is so easy to put a rubber dam or a cotton rolls or other forms of isolation. But in reality, we come across this Pokemon-like scenario. Irwin, in Cardiology Today in 1984, had said that saliva is one of our natural resources that is unappreciated until there's a shortage. Our profession treats saliva as an enemy that needs to be expunged, aspirated, and dammed. Well, at this time of a COVID crisis, I thoroughly have to disagree with Irwin since I feel saliva needs to be expunged, aspirated, and dammed in order to have a correct infection control. In past few years, these are the essay questions which have been there in the PG Endodontics question paper, that is about saliva composition, functions, clinical significance, its role in causation of dental caries, role of saliva on properties of restorative materials, etc. Coming to the contents, salivary gland development, anatomy, physiology, secretion, functions, properties, association with dental caries, salivary microbiome, impact on restorative materials, saliva secretion in health and disease, saliva-based diagnostic technologies, salivary gland dysfunction, advances in salivary diagnostics, and conclusion. Salivary gland development. Now this you can see is the nasal septum and this is the tongue. So the development of major salivary glands precedes that of the minor salivary glands. You know the major salivary glands are bilateral. Parotid begins first at 6th week, which is ectodermal in origin, followed by submandibular bud, which starts at 6th or 7th week with endodermal origin. Sublingual bud starts at 8th week with endodermal origination. So this pre-bud or primordium proliferates with initial bud formation, then pseudoglandular stage, canalicular stage, and then terminal bud stage. So anatomy, we know the three major salivary glands, that is parotid, submandibular, and sublingual. Now parotid gland is present anterior to the external acoustic meatus. The duct of the parotid gland is called the Stenson's duct. It has majorly serous secretions and contributes to 20% of saliva. Now, submandibular gland is present at the submandibular triangle. The duct of submandibular gland is the Wharton's duct. In unstimulated state itself, it produces 65% of saliva, which is the most major contribution. It has 50% higher calcium in the saliva. Therefore, mandibular anteriors have lesser caries and more calculus. Now, sublingual glands are present in the floor of the mouth. The duct of the sublingual gland is called Bartholin's duct and it is predominantly mucus. The minor salivary glands are these, that is labial, buccal, glossopalatine, von Ebner's, palatine, etc. So the functional unit of salivary gland is called the salivon, which is composed of acinus, lumen, intercalated duct, etc. But the basic structural unit is an acinar cell. Note the pyramidal shape and the nuclei. So after the formation of saliva by acinar cells, it transfers to the lumen, followed by intercalated duct, striated duct, excretory duct, and main collecting duct. This is analogous to that of grapes, in which each grapefruit could be compared to the acini, followed by a striated duct and then excretory duct. Myoepithelial cells are wrapped around the acinar cells, which contract on stimulation, squeezing out the saliva. Now, this is the schematic diagram of a typical salivary gland. A is the serous acini, A' is the cross section. Note the pyramidal shape of the cells and a circular nuclei with some zymogen granules and rough endoplasmic reticulum. Coming to B, which is the serous demilume, and B dash is the cross section of serous demilume. Now, researchers don't really know if this exists in a true salivary gland because they believe that this could be a result of the cross section. So, serous demilume is nothing but a mucus acinus surrounded by partially serous acinus. Coming to C, C is the mucus acinus and C dash is its cross section. Note the flattened basal nuclei. Coming to D is the intercalated duct, D dash is its cross section. E is the striated duct, E dash is its cross section, and F is the excretory duct. Note that the last three ducts do not have any granules. So these are the diagrammatic representations of the serous and pathway of synthesis, storage, and exocytosis of secretory protein. Number 1 is the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which synthesizes the protein. Number 2 is Golgi apparatus, which transfers the protein to transphase. 3 is the immature granules, 4 is the maturation of the granules, and 5 is exocytosis. Now the mucus cell has similar mechanism, just that number 3 is the mucus spool and there are no granules as such. Coming to composition of saliva, composed of 99.5% of water, 0.2% inorganic constituents like sodium, chloride, potassium, bicarbonate, etc. 0.3% is the organic constituents containing lipase, mucin, etc. Gingival exudate traces are present in the oral fluid. Coming to the flow, it is 0.75 to 1.5 liters per day. In unstimulated state, the secretion is 0.1 ml per minute. In stimulated rate, the secretion is 0.2 ml per minute. The pH is 6.35 to 6.85. The secretion is higher during the day. Specific gravity varies from 1.002 to 1.012. It is hypotonic. It's a clear, slightly acidic, mucoserous exocrine secretion. The average human produces 25,000 quarts of saliva in a lifetime. That is enough spit to fill 2 swimming pools. Coming to what controls saliva secretion. The thought, sight, smell, and taste causes an increase in salivation, whereas sleep, dehydration, fatigue, and fear causes a decrease in salivation. The brainstem contains pons and medulla, which then contain the salivatory nuclei. So pons through the superior salivatory nuclei sends stimulus, that is parasympathetic stimulus, via the cranial nerve 7, which is the facial nerve through parotid, to synapse at the submandibular ganglion, forming a second order neuron, which then sends impulses to the submandibular and sublingual gland. The inferior salivatory nuclei sends impulses via the glossopharyngeal nerve, which then synapses at the optic ganglion, which then sends stimulus to the parotid gland. Coming to the basal surface of each acinar cell, this contains parasympathetic tone of receptors called muscarinic receptors. So cranial nerve 7 and 9, which is the facial nerve and glossopharyngeal nerve, stimulate the release of acetylcholine, which bind with this receptor in order to increase salivation. Whereas what happens in drugs and dry mouth is that anticholinergics like atropine competitively bind to the muscarinic receptor, thereby decreasing the salivation. Diuretics increase the excretion of saliva, therefore decreasing the salivation. Similarly, antipsychotics, sympathomimetics, and cytotoxic drugs could cause dry mouth. Saliva secretion is majorly controlled by the autonomic nervous system. There is a two-step production of saliva. The first step is production of primary isotonic saliva. Final step is the hypotonic saliva. So you can see this is the acinus lumen and this is the striated duct. So here, since there has to be a production of isotonic saliva, there is influx of sodium and chloride ions through their channels, and also there's an influx of water. This action occurs through acetylcholine stimulation, whereas here the final saliva needs to be hypotonic, therefore there is excretion of sodium and chloride through active transport, which requires ATP, and potassium influx with bicarbonate, which occurs passively. This is what I had mentioned before, that isotonic primary saliva gets converted into final hypotonic saliva. This is a picture showing various channels, like this is chloride channel, sodium channel, ATPase for transfer of sodium, Acetylcholine binds with the muscarinic receptor in order to increase the calcium ion concentration in the lumen. Coming to the food production, so there is formation of a bolus with mucins. Zinc helps in taste, amylase helps in digestion, bicarbonate helps in buffering, proline-rich glycoproteins helps in lubrication, etc. So according to current concepts of caries etiology in DCNA 2004, there was a study conducted in hamsters, one group with intact salivary glands, the other group with desalivated major glands. So the average number of teeth which are carious were lesser in that of intact salivary glands group. Now we know the caries triad, that is microorganisms, tooth and food, and the fourth unit of the caries triad is the time. But all these require the universal presence of saliva. Coming to the Stephens curve. Now, when sugar enters into the mouth, it enters at a normal pH, then it rapidly reduces, followed by an increase. Now, 5.5 is the critical pH below which minerals are lost from the tooth surfaces. High pH, buffering capacity, and flow causes a low caries incidence. Thick, sticky, and frothy saliva with an increased viscosity increases the susceptibility to caries. So this is the demineralization remineralization cycle. So 5.5 is the critical pH of hydroxyapatite and fluorapatite's critical pH is 4.5. So as the pH reduces from 5.5 to 4.5, there is a demineralization, that is hydroxyapatite dissolves, but fluorapatite could form in the presence of a fluoride. On further decrease, both hydroxyapatite and fluorapatite dissolve, and on further decrease, if the hydrogen ions are exhausted and all other ions are retained, it could cause an erosion. Between 4.5 to 5.5, caries can result, and beyond 5.5, the remineralization rate could be greater than demineralization. And beyond 6.8 pH, there is calculus formation. Salivary buffers are nothing but bicarbonate, carbonic acid buffer, phosphate buffer, etc., which help in maintaining the pH of saliva. Coming to antibacterial functions. So lysozyme is an enzymatic protein which is anti-Streptococcus mutans. It binds to salivary anions and the complex destabilizes the cell wall, resulting in autolysis. Lactoferrin is an iron binding protein. It acts against Streptococcus mutans. So lactoferrin is also required by various good bacteria in order to synthesize. Now, peroxidase, thiocyanate, and hydrogen peroxide substrates are all produced by saliva. So, this resultant hypothiocyanate is an inhibitor of bacterial glycolysis. It forms toxic cyanosulfurous acid. Alpha amylase metabolizes starch and polysaccharides. Stadherin acts as a lubricant for tooth surface. Histatins enhance the stability of hydroxyapatite. Coming to proline-rich proteins, they prevent demineralization, adherence of bacteria to the tooth surface. Cystatins promote remineralization. Mucins are two types, Mg1 and Mg2. Mg1 helps in formation of enamel pellicle. Mg2 helps in clearance of oral bacteria. Salivary immunoglobulin A is the principal immunoglobulin. It inhibits bacterial adherence to enamel. This concept was trying to be implemented for caries immunization or development of a caries vaccine. Coming to salivary microbiome. According to Daniel Bellstrom in the Journal of Oral Microbiology in 2020, non-pathogenic commensal bacteria have a symbiotic relationship with the host. Conglomerate of bacteria shed from oral surfaces, throat, tongue, and tonsils, individualized, temporarily stable, and influenced by diet and lifestyle. Hence, they say that in order to understand a person's health, one should look into the person's oral cavity. The acquired enamel pellicle is a proteinaceous film covering the tooth surface, which is initially formed by adsorption of these salivary proteins. Salivary microbiome in disease. Porphyromonas gingivalis, Tannerella forsythia, Treponema denticola, Prevotella intermedia, and Actinomycetes, Actinomycetum comitans are biomarkers for periodontitis. Candida albicans, Fusobacterium, Prevotella, Leptotrichia are biomarkers for increased caries risk or recurrent caries. In case of diabetes, there are higher levels of P. gingivalis and T. forsythia. Similarly, in obesity, in oral squamous cell carcinoma, there is abundance of Prevotella tannerae. In radiotherapy, increased in salivary levels of lactobacillus. In chemotherapy-induced oral mucositis, there is decrease in salivary levels of health-associated bacterial genera. In non-small cell lung cancer, higher levels of streptococcus. In rheumatic arthritis, there is a depletion of Haemophilus species. So these are the saliva-based caries activity tests. I'm not going to go into detail. They are lactobacillus colony count test, Snyder test, reductase test, buffer capacity test, phosdic calcium dissolution test, streptococcus mutans adherents, and dip slide methods. Coming to the impact on restorative materials, I'm talking from a conservative dentistry point of view. So in case of zinc containing amalgam alloys, there could be a delayed expansion on contamination with saliva during condensation. With GIC, there could be water contamination resulting in dissolution of matrix and leaching out of calcium ions. In dry mouth, fluoride releasing materials should be preferred. In case etching is contaminated, there should be re-etching. In case of composite contamination with water or saliva, there could be bond failure and water absorption, that is slow degradation of composite. Since impressions taken are in constant touch with saliva, there needs to be a proper disinfection protocol to be followed to prevent cross-infection. Now, there was a study in the Journal of Clinical Experimental Dentistry in 2017 by Golem et al., determining the effect of dental restorative materials on total antioxidant capacity and calcium concentration of unstimulated saliva. In conclusion, dental composite restorations increase the total antioxidant capacity and decrease the calcium ion levels more than amalgam itself. So this is the scenario if saliva is red. Hence, now more than ever, we require the usage of personal protective equipment kits. In the Journal of Oral Microbiology in 2012, Healthcare Associated Viral and Bacterial Infections in Dentistry article was mentioned, in which, apart from present-day COVID-19, cross-transmission risks in dentistry were related to HSV1 and HSV2 and varicella zoster virus. Now, HIV via saliva is unlikely due to low salivary titers. Hepatitis B after vaccination has a lower risk. Tuberculosis has a lower risk, but then again, evidence of transmission is present. Pseudomonas aeruginosa and Legionella species frequently recovered from direct dental unit water lines where it can form biofilms in the tubing. Coming to saliva as a biomarker for caries, salivary albumin is inhibitor of caries, so is proline-rich proteins. Now, C-reactive protein is a biomarker produced when immune response during caries progression and development of inflammation is there. Also, calcium, phosphate, strontium, zinc enhance remineralization, whereas copper causes breakdown of hydroxyapatite. Superoxide dismutase again increases the caries activity. This was mentioned by Hegde et al. In a systematic review in Journal of Conservative Dentistry 2019. So saliva-based diagnostic technologies, according to Lorenzo et al., are saliva is a rich reservoir of different proteins and peptides. Liquid biopsy helps in the biomonitoring of several biomarkers, which I had mentioned before. Omics are nothing but the biomarkers, genomics, proteomics, etc. So this is the procedure of spitting into the funnel, followed by a chemical insertion and then a microanalysis, followed by a biomarker report. So this is just the outline of whatever I had mentioned before. That is, saliva has a buffering activity, digestion, mineralization, lubrication, tissue coating, antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial properties. Coming to the collection of saliva, it could be in resting or stimulated state. Salivary gland stimulation could be with chewing gums, citric acid taste stimuli, pharmacologic and electric stimulants. Whole saliva or individual gland saliva could be used. Coming to the advances in salivary diagnostics, it is in detection of substance abuse, in forensic genetics, in detection of oral cancer, systemic diseases like autoimmune malignancy, infectious viral diseases, caries activity testing, etc. Salivary gland dysfunction roughly divided into developmental, obstructive, inflammatory, neoplastic, and degenerative. In developmental conditions, that is Aberrant salivary glands, aplasia, hyperplasia, atresia, obstructive conditions such as silolithiasis, mucocele, necrotizing silometaplasia, inflammatory such as viral infections like mumps, bacterial infection like sialadenitis, neoplastic diseases like epithelial and mesenchymal diseases, degenerative like Sjogren syndrome, and ionizing radiation. The last but not the least is xerostomia. So during parotidectomy, there could be an injury to the auriculotemporal nerve or the intermingling of auriculotemporal nerve with that of the facial nerve. Therefore, there could be a resultant gustatory sweating while eating. One other implication of parotidectomy is a facial palsy. The patient has a facial palsy on the right side, hence there is inability to eat on that side. Coming to the causes of xerostomia, as I had mentioned before, antidepressants, anticholinergics, etc., systemic diseases like autoimmune diseases, diabetes, malnutrition, radiotherapy, decrease of at least 50% in unstimulated salivary flow rate results in xerostomia. It manifests as oral soreness and burning sensations, difficulty in mastication and speech. Some of the therapeutic options are endogenous and exogenous. Endogenous is pharmaceutical, mechanical solutions, genetic. Exogenous approach, drinking water, moisturizing preparation, saliva substitutes such as xerostom. New types of salivary substitutes, often in the form of gums, gels, or mouthwashes, mimic some of the properties of human saliva, that is antimicrobial buffering and remineralizing. So, as to summarize whatever I had mentioned before, coming to anatomy has major and minor glands, composition, water, inorganic, organic, secretion, autonomic nervous system, primary isotonic saliva, secondary hypotonic saliva, functions, remineralization, antibacterial functions, proteins, enzymes like amylase, stadherin, Stephen curve in dental caries, biomarkers, dental saliva-based diagnostic tests, dysfunction, xerostomia, etc. These are my references. I hope you've had happy learning. Thank you.